Hello, my name is Topher Winwood, and I'm a software engineer at Rare Limited, and I'm also an accessibility champion there. I'm a white male wearing a white shirt and a branded Rare hoodie. Now, I'm not an expert in blindness, despite that being what my talk is about. I don't have lived experience, but my point here is that you don't need to be an expert either in order to have a positive impact. Sea of Thieves is a shared world adventure game, or SWAG, based around telling your own pirate tales. It's a first-person game played in crews of 4 as you go out and explore the world and discover secrets. So, I'm going to quickly cover what are the main things we're going to hit during this talk. So, I'll start off with an introductory and Rare's high-level goals when it comes to making accessible games. I'm going to talk through some of Sea of Thieves' main blind accessibility features. I'm going to give some technical suggestions on how you can implement screen readers, and then I'm going to talk about culture within a studio. So, we're often asked, how does a blind person play a game like Sea of Thieves? And I like to respond somewhat jokingly, when part of a helpful crew, hopefully with a lot of laughter. Our blind gamers, for the most part, tend to stay on the ship, which is a fairly self-contained area, whether that means steering the wheel, firing cannons, or just fishing off the edge. Here's one of our pirate legends, Sightless Combat, scoring a direct hit on an enemy.
Y button.
Me again?
Look controller Y button. Unload cannonball.
Out of fire.
I got.
Yeah,
I got mine.
Look controller Y button.
What a
Unload
shot!
cannonball.
Oh, that was like we're talking that game.
There was no cue. There was no cue for that. That was just intuition.
A slide featuring a bullseye reads goals and introductory.
So, what are some of Rare's goals when it comes to making an accessible game? A big one for us is parity of experience. This means that all players, whether blind, hard of hearing, physically disabled or other, should, where possible, experience the same game. This usually involves adding multimodal approaches, making sure that things that are visual also have audio cues, for example. But interestingly, sometimes this means saying no to removing a certain unintended barrier, like the disorientating smoke from cannon fire. Because, having talked to the design team, it was intended all along for all players. Another important one is giving players agency. Now this is similar to the first point. It's a better goal for us that a blind player can navigate the entire world fully just using audio clues, instead of us providing teleporting options that jump you around, because then you're not playing the same game as other people. Another one is looking forwards as well as backporting. As a live service game that's over 5-6 years old, we've already shipped a lot, meaning we have to carefully go back and add accessibility into core systems that weren't designed for it. I can tell you, this is not easy in some cases, but it is worth it. However, as we add new content, we're considering much earlier on in the process what unintended barriers might adding these features introduce for certain players. One other important one. If you take nothing else away from this talk, the single best thing that you can be doing as a studio is hiring disability consultants. Find people with lived experience who have expertise in sharing this sort of use of research. Talk to them, pay them, and understand what you can be doing from their point of view to make your game better for them. So, when we talk about blindness and vision loss, it actually refers to quite a lot of things. A naive common understanding is that blindness just means no vision whatsoever, but the reality is that it is a large spectrum. These simulation images from Perkins School for the Blind show how it's not always just blurry vision either. There could be visual spots, halos, color blindness. Knowing this can help you design accessible systems that help a wider range of people. Similarly, accessibility also means many things. A game cannot be completely accessible. Every person has different needs. Now, we've done a lot to improve accessibility in Sea of Thieves since launch, but fundamentally, it's still a game that requires sighted assistance to play to its best, usually from a helpful and understanding crew. That said, we've received so much wonderful feedback from blind gamers who do enjoy playing with a sighted crew and are able to enjoy the game very much nonetheless. Now, blind accessibility is a lot of things, and it's not just text-to-speech, which is a common misunderstanding. It's not just making your UI tool be readable, though that is important. True blind accessibility involves investing in quality audio, and this is so important to make the game parts of your game accessible. One of my favourite anecdotes is watching a blind Sea of Thieves gamer call out a shipwreck way out to sea before anyone else knew it was there. Surprised, I asked, "How did you know?" And he responded, "Well, can't you hear the seagulls there as well?" So, before I talk through all of our blind accessibility features, I want to give you an understanding of what our biggest challenge is, and that's navigation of a 3D world. Traversing land in a first-person game without sight is difficult, and while we're always improving the audio cues, there's still a lot of work to be done. This is why blind gamers tend to stick to the ship in Sea of Thieves. It's a well-known space, and far more manageable to move around in, while still having plenty of activities to partake in. This is a great example of how, even if your whole game isn't as accessible as you'd like it to be, having parts of it that you dedicate time to can include so many new players.
A slide picturing multiple treasures on a table reads Features.
So, let's talk about what Sea of Thieves does to improve blind accessibility. Instead of going too in-depth on any one feature, I want to give you a broad range of ideas that can hopefully inspire similar systems in your own games. And of course, I say features in quotes. The best accessibility is baked so deep into your game, it's hard to even point at it. So, the first and most obvious one is that most of our menus are narrated. If you move around using the keyboard, mouse, or Xbox controller, the text-to-speech system will kick in and let you know what you're looking at. Notification narration is kind of similar to UI narration, but with different challenges. When you level up in-game or you hand in a treasure chest, we pop up a notification and we narrate that out loud. But this comes with many challenges. These are asynchronous and can appear at unpredictable times, and this is hard to balance. What's high priority? Do we play this if you're in the middle of a cutscene? Say we've got an even more important narration come in. Do we cut off existing ones, or do we add it onto a queue at the end? You have to design these carefully. So, text size is one of the most common accessibility concerns that people have, where it's typically too small. In June 2020, we doubled text size across the board, and then we gave players an option to lower it back down if needed later. Audio mixing controls has been very common in video games for quite a while, and it's important that we do that as well. That's things like choosing between stereo or mono audio, or being able to separately customize levels for voice, ambient, or music. I call this out because these are still important things, even if they're boring by today's standards. What big accessibility features are we seeing introduced now that are going to be boring in 5 years' time? Nautical narration is one of my favourite features, and this applies to our compasses in the game. When using a compass either by hand or on the ship, this narrates the direction that you're facing in. Now, it doesn't work in storms, but the regular compass doesn't either because it's spinning, and this is the parity of experience I was talking about earlier. It's highly customizable, and it gives a lot of agency to our blind players steering the ship. Instead of being told, turn right for a bit, oh, now left, now right, someone can just say, head east, and the player can steer the ship as needed. Tooltip narration comes off the back of the nautical narration work we did. We made sure that all interaction points in the game are narrated. So here you can see it says press X to use cannon. This simplifies navigation and lets you know what item you're about to use. It's highly customizable, so you can set delays, automatic repeats, you can say it to only read the button or only the text, or even swap them round, and we've found that many different gamers actually use all of these settings. Tooltip narration is a great example of that backporting goal I talked about earlier. It was very technically challenging for us to get this right, and if we'd considered it from the start, it would have been so much easier to do first time round. Sea rock sounds. We added the sound of waves crashing up against large rocks at sea, which increases immersion and gives players a multimodal cue that these large obstacles need dodging. But we also added a toggle, which lowers the ship sounds and boosts the rock sounds. This means all players benefit from the sounds, but some can choose to have an experience tailored more to their needs. Here's a tweet by Shay, one of our pirate legends without sight. I just independently dodged a rock. Crewmate was AFK, and I may or may not have panicked slightly. Last but not least, we try to be colorblind friendly where possible. Here's an example of our flags in the game. Notice how they all have distinct shapes, color combinations, and designs.
A slide featuring a blue wireframe sphere reads Technical Design of Screen Readers.
So, I'm going to give you a recommendation for improving the technical design of screen readers and narrators. Look at how websites work. You may be familiar with HTML. When written correctly, web browsers turn this into an accessibility tree. This is different from them simply narrating the text as they see it. By using this special format, tools like JAWS, NVDA, and Windows Narrator can provide custom navigation options to the user, like, just tell me what headings there are on this page, or jump to the next paragraph. This is so much more powerful, and gives a lot more agency to the end user. Now, I mentioned when written correctly, and in this case I'm referring to use of the Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessible Rich Internet Applications Standard, or YARIA for short. Our menu UI is actually built in HTML and TypeScript, and from the very first day we followed YARIA, despite not knowing if or how we'd connect to a narration tool. But this meant that when we did write integration with the Windows and Xbox narration APIs, a lot of the hard work was already solved for us. Following from that, a current area of research for us is how we can apply the same idea to 3D game objects. At the moment, each game object is responsible for its own narration. What if we could draw on the idea of an accessibility tree, create an intermediate format, and then have our game objects translate themselves into that? Then, our narrator tool has much more control over how, when, and what to narrate, rather than things like delays and repeats needing to be re-implemented for every game object.
4 rare employees smile while wearing special effect jerseys. The text reads culture.
Let's talk culture for a moment. Building a culture of accessibility is not easy, and it takes a long time. Some key long-term impact is to ensure that management and your senior leadership understand the importance of accessibility, and that they mark it as a core goal and set those expectations, and help create the time and space for people to do that work. For those people doing the implementation, however, they may not need that long-term vision, but they do need specific knowledge. Provide them with plenty of material, like GAConf videos and the Xbox accessibility guidelines. It's no good knowing you've got space for accessibility if you don't have the knowledge, and you just end up adding a colorblind filter to your game and calling it a day. As well as this, at Rare, we try to make sure that there's plenty of space to keep accessibility top of mind. For example, we have monthly catch-ups which everyone across the studio is invited to join in, listen, learn, and share. Once a year, we run Accessmas, where we talk about and emphasize accessibility from around the industry and run several workshops and presentations. We send people to conferences like GA-Conf, which helps build that knowledge. And we do a lot of support for certain gaming charities, like Special Effect. This really helps people inside the studio get that first taste of, wait a minute, this is how we can be helping people with disabilities. And of course, we pay disability consultants and we talk about it loudly because real user research is so important. One last thing. Let's talk about game engines. They have a huge opportunity to shape the future for the better when it comes to games accessibility. Some of them are starting to look at narration as a built-in option, and we should applaud and encourage that. We should be asking our game engine providers, how are we going to make this better? How can we push it further? Because if we are able to get that, then that means all of the indie studios, all of the small creators who may not have the knowledge or time to create these systems, gets it out of the box for free. And I think that's great. And before I go, I couldn't miss the opportunity to share some of the alternative titles for this talk, which include Aye, Cap'n, No Accessibility Bugs, I Patched Them, and of course, Sea of Thieves. I hope you learned a lot and have a wonderful time. Thank you.